Gearoid Energy, proud sponsors of the GAA All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship and GAA Legends Tour Series of Croke Park. Hashtag Hurling to the core.
Hello and welcome to the Tyrone Independent.ie's GAA podcast in association with Gearoid Energy. I'm Will Slattery, delighted to be joined as always by Michael Verney. Michael, hello.
How's it going, Will?
I'm doing well, thanks. I'm doing well. Interesting weekend of football action. We finally got a proper game of championship football, Donegal, Derry. It was good to be able to come in, this Monday and actually have a really good game to talk about. It's been a couple of one-sided hammerings we've had on the agenda the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, there's probably been not too much positive in the football championship so far, but that was definitely, it was real tense Ulster final or Ulster action. Real tense championship action with where you literally thought the game could turn so quickly and turn either way. And in fairness, it did. It turned the Donegal way at the end. Obviously, football dominated most of the weekend, but massive hurling game on Saturday with Laois getting one over on Antrim and sending Antrim back down to the Joe McDonagh. Huge win for them, probably a career or a season best performance from Laois, and just when it was needed. And now they've a big game coming up against Westmeath in a couple of weeks' time to try and save their Division 1 status. Unfortunate for Antrim, because we talked about Antrim during the league about the massive strides that they'd made, and obviously beating Clare and beating Laois and drawing at Wexford, and now they're probably after taking a step or two forward, they've taken a couple of steps backwards. But that's kind of the cut and trust kind of nature of the championship. But that was it was an interesting weekend on the hurling front as well, albeit a lot quieter than next weekend, which I'm sure we're going to talk about.
Yeah, no, there's some good games to come in the qualifier draw. And just to let our listeners know, we have a very special guest joining us in the second half of the show. Hurler of the Year and Limerick star Gearoid Hegarty is going to be on to talk all things about, I suppose, his journey over the last couple of years and a bit about how Limerick are going and how they've been going over the last couple of years. So really excited to chat to him. But yeah, the draw came out today, and I think it was preordained. Clare versus Wexford once again. Davy versus Brian Lohan. I feel like I've seen them play so much in the last while, but it's always great box office. And Cork and Galway getting a bye into the second round. Woodford playing Laois as well. Cork and Galway probably needed that bye, or Galway certainly maybe to regroup from the Dublin game. But it's set up to be an absolute barn burner next weekend.
I'd say we may call him Mystic Milan from now on, because he, in fairness, he predicted it last Monday morning when nobody was even looking that far ahead to the qualifiers, and he predicted it. Such an interesting game, Wexford and Clare, just on, the ongoing probably Davy versus Lohan feud, nearly you'd have to call it this stage. COVID gate, all the negativity around Clare throughout the winter, the fact that Clare beat Wexford in last year's championship and even beat them in the 18 All-Ireland quarter-final as well. It's the game that championship even needed, just to fire it on even to another level. Hugely exciting game, and obviously Laois's reward for beating Antrim at the weekend is a game against a Waterford side who were unbelievably flat against Clare. So they'll see that as an opportunity, albeit it would be a massive upset. Then you have two provincial finals thrown in on top of it as well on the hurling front as well. So yeah, loads to look forward to.
Yeah, the big games are coming thick and fast now, but we're going to kick off with Football on the Throne podcast this week in association with Gearoid Energy, and we're delighted to have Donnacha Boyle with us to go over all the weekend's action. Donnacha, how are you?
Good, lads, yeah. Championship's well and truly up and running now.
No, definitely. I think we badly needed that Donegal Derry game yesterday afternoon and from a footballing perspective to really kind of kickstart the whole thing. Donnacha, game of the championship, I think for sure. It didn't really have a high bar to clear, but really exciting game. Derry will be very disappointed to let that slip, but Donegal is showing some very good resilience and character in the closing stages. Yeah,
I think it was by far, I suppose, the best game of the championship so far. But as you said, the competition for that title at the moment has been fairly low. I really gave Derry a massive chance coming into the game. I saw them against Cavan in the league, and you can say that Cavan's form was poor and went on to be even worse in that game. But I thought they had a little bit of something about them that day that marked them out as real, proper. They looked like way better than the Division 3 team. They looked like upper end Division 2 at least that day. They have classy forwards. They have a couple of very good midfielders. They have a very good system. They're really well coached by Rory Gallagher. So I knew they had every chance. And it took something special to do it in the end from Paddy McBrearty. And that's what it was. It was a very modern piece of football, if you like. It was keep the ball, work it to the shooter who delivered. And then at the other end, it was another very modern piece of football. It's just Derry just could not get the shooter on the ball. And you could actually say that maybe in that moment they were over-analysing or being over tactical about what they did. It was 1 minute past, he had a lot of time. Someone had to take a pot. Someone had to. The referee played 70 seconds nearly of extra time, and they kept recycling the ball. And they didn't even get a shot off. And that will really bug them, and really bug, I suppose, Rory Gallagher, that they didn't get that message onto the field quick enough. They definitely tried to get their shooters on the ball, but after they missed the first couple of times, they needed, someone just had to, a wide would have been better than what happened in the end. And they didn't even manufacture a shot. So they will be sick this morning. And sick as well, they have no qualifier to go to because they're really our team on the rise.
Yeah, as you say, like David Goldrick definitely gave them ample opportunity to get a shot off in the end. And there was one or two opportunities, especially at the very, very end, where one or two players found themselves in a bit of space, but opted, as you say, to try to get the ball into a more experienced shooter. And then the amount of goal chances, Michael, they had as well. Like, you know, the one that was panned off the underside of the crossbar was probably the best one, but there was two or three other ones. There was more than enough chances there when you lose by 1 point to think that Derry could well have been in an Ulster semi-final. I think it would have been their first victory since 2015 in the province, which, you know, that's a long time waiting.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a case of a lot of missed opportunities. Donegal is there. You're better to take a shot and for to sky wide or wherever it goes than to kind of just died wondering yesterday, which is that's a really difficult thing to take over the next while. And in fairness to David Goldrick, there wasn't much he could do. He played as long as he could. The 3 or 4 really clear chances at taking a shot. Fair enough, they might have been lowish percentage shots, but they needed to take a shot and they didn't. And that's a killer for them. At least they have promotion and they've got Division 2 football ahead for next year. It's some sort of solace, but they'll be sick this morning. From a Donegal point of view, it's the first time in a while you'd say that Donegal have won a game that they probably shouldn't have won. There's been the Cavan game last year. They were expected to win that game. Things were going wrong. Things were going against them, and they weren't able to turn the tide. It was the same when they played Mayo in that kind of crunch Super 8 game a couple of years ago as well. First time in a while that they've actually been able to win one of those games where they're not maybe performing at a really high level. I thought Oran McNeilish had a really good cameo near the end. I think he won the free for McBrearty. He kind of passed off to McBrearty and then screened one of the Derry lads to give McBrearty a chance to get a shot away, and he just hadn't had any space all day. Chrissy McCaig was marking him, fierce tight, never gave him any latitude, but just that class. And it was just to be able to make a chance like that look so routine almost when he gets a shot away. That's like a couple of years ago, that would have been seen as such a low percentage shot, 40 yards nearly out to the side of small, but we just floated it over beautifully. And they managed to, it's after working out so well for Donegal. They got Murphy onto the field. They got, 20 or 25 minutes into him. Doesn't look like there's any ramifications to him coming on yesterday. So they've only a week turnaround now, but they're in kind of a different place now than maybe they were even coming into the Derry game. They look like they have nearly all their best players on the pitch now. So I think that was a huge one for Donegal because they haven't dealt particularly well with adversity in recent years. And yeah, I just think that was a massive win for them with a lot of things going wrong. Big missed opportunity for Derry.
The Murphy thing was huge as well. Like for a long time, people have been pointing that if he's not on the pitch, will they see out those games? He wasn't there for a lot of that game the other day, and he's definitely not 100% fit. But the fact that they could do and get through that match, and as you mentioned, Michael, under that pressure as well, because they have flattered to deceive a little bit over the last while. They have had a couple of big games where it's come down to it, and they just haven't delivered versus the talent they're able to put on the pitch. So if they had to lose that yesterday and lose at home in Ballybuffet to a Derry team who are really only coming on the rise, who don't have a whole lot of experience operating at that kind of level, if they were to lose that at home, there'd be an awful lot of soul searching in Donegal this morning. So it was very, very important for them. Getting Michael Murphy fully fit on the pitch was huge. But as you mentioned, McBrearty stepped up. He actually did something similar against Meath in the qualifier maybe 2 years ago. Last minute, more or less, kick of the ball and on the loop, and I think he had Donald Keoghan, who's an excellent man marker, hanging out of him, and he found it. And when he gets on that left foot, yeah, look, he's one of the best around.
And as it was pointed out a fair bit that he had a very subdued day. Chrissy McCaig, really got the grips with them. So to even have the kind of fortitude to step up when things maybe aren't going as well and nailing such a monster score at the end was some moment for him. Obviously, you know, Michael Murphy coming back, Donegal, was doubly important in the sense that they only have a week turnaround now to the Tyrone game. So it was vital that they could at least stress test whether or not he could be involved in a game so soon after this one. You saw Tyrone in action over the weekend. You know, after the league, that game against Kerry, very, very poor way to finish the league. There was a few question marks. They got the win over a team, I suppose, in Cavan, who haven't had a good year by any means. But, you know, what did you see from them over the weekend? Were you impressed? Were you more confident in their ability to make a championship run now, or how do you feel?
I think the whole thing is sort of there's an asterisk over with Cavan. Cavan were, bar the first 15 minutes, Cavan were really poor. They looked gassed for a lot of the game. They didn't look like they had any real belief that they were going to do it. They were a couple of points down running up to half time, ended up being 4 points down. And the way the game was going and the way Cavan started to struggle, it looked like a big gap for them to try and make up. And then, you know, Darren McCurry was absolutely phenomenal. I think he was the story of the game. You know, I suppose McCurry and players of his ilk, you know, out and out inside forwards, if you like, maybe didn't always get the exposure that they would have thought they were due under Mickey Hart. And if this is a new era for Tyrone and they've given McCurry this sort of responsibility in the absence of Cathal McShane, in the absence of Conor McKenna, Derek Canavan's injured. He was the main man, and I have to say, in the first half, he was absolutely phenomenal. He was almost untouchable. Now, Cavan didn't do themselves any favours. They put a debutant on him for the start. By the time they made a switch, his tail was already up. So it's very hard to know where Tyrone are at in terms of having any more of All-Ireland contenders than they were last year. I did Donegal and Tyrone in the league earlier this year, and that was in Oma. And honestly, Tyrone probably should have won it until there was a sending off, maybe at the 3/4 point stage. So they're absolutely in a really good spot in terms of that. They have McShane back after getting him on the pitch for 20 minutes yesterday, along with a 3-point. He got 3 points for himself as well. So they're in a good spot. They will not be going into the Donegal game thinking, we have something to find here. I think that's anyone's game, and if whoever comes out of that gets a ferocious bounce, and they can go anywhere from there. But in terms of Tyrone, they did loads of things well. Ronan McNamee's sending off was, I saw the point the lads were making on the Sunday game last night. It was just a push to the face. Was it a strike in action? They can probably apply it technically, but you would be disappointed in them for getting involved with it. It was like just utterly needless. The game felt like it was done at that stage, and you give the referee a decision to make. And you know that if they go in without him, it's a loss because he's a very important player to them. But Tyrone, look, they did everything you could have asked them. They won comfortably. They played with some adventure. They've got some injured players back in the pitch. So yeah, they're in a good spot going into it. But still, you know, was not top flight football in terms of Cavan just weren't up to it on the day. They've fallen so far back from where they were last winter.
Yeah, Michael, just a word on Cavan first. Like, you know, what have you made of their decline in 2021? I know Tipperary similarly haven't had a great campaign either, both after winning those provincial titles last year.
Yeah, sure, it's mad really, because like you wrote off the league last year because of what their exploits in the championship, and you're just saying like that they were just getting ready for championship or whatever, and the way it worked out, it was a bit of an outlier. And then this year just haven't been able to get things moving again. It's strange. It's strange to get your head around it, just because you'd imagine the championship exploits would have pushed them on a bit, and they would have been even keen to try and get back up to Division 2. And it's funny when things start going wrong, it can be so difficult to just even stem the blood loss, and just kind of someone needs to nearly yell stop. And I'm sure that's the last thing they wanted, was to go down to Division 4, but it was so much more difficult to turn things around than this year. At least last year they had, you know, the break in the league, and the last couple of rounds were played really, really quickly before championship. This year it's just been, you know, a real kind of steady decline for them. Mm-hmm. And like if you're to take it on face value, like, you know, they're among the ranked 25 to 32 teams in Ireland, and it's very hard to get your head around that. And Mickey Graham almost has to, I think it'd be his 4th year next year if he stays on, and then you're trying to turn things around over a period of 2 to 3 years and get them back up to Division 2. So it's just very, very, very hard to get your head around how all the goodwill and momentum of last winter, how that seems to have just been totally undone. And as Donegal said, there was like the guys that were absolutely ripping it up in last year's championship just couldn't make a mark this year. It's a very, very strange one, and sure Mickey Graham will reflect on it. It'll be very interesting to get his views over the next month to 6 weeks, just to see where it kind of all went wrong for them. But from an outsider looking in, it's very, very hard to put your finger on it.
Porrick Faulkner, the all-star full-back from Cavan, said last week, he said, look, if we lose to Tyrone, it'll be one of the worst years in Cavan football. And that's what it turned out to be. Last year was one of the best. Teams don't win the Ulster Championship from the preliminary round. I think it's happened 3 or 4 times in history in 100 plus years. And Cavan did it last year, playing week on week on week, which was beyond extraordinary what they pulled off last year. And for them to go from that to such brilliance, and you'd imagine they would have got a bounce off that to this year, it is inexplicable. And I don't know, maybe sometimes we often talk about momentum, which is one of those great undefinable things. You don't know how it affects a group, but maybe it works the other way as well. When things started to go against them, there was just a snowball effect from there. And I think we saw a team that were, I think Cavan, no one in Cavan will be sad to see the back of that year. It was just a disaster for them from start to finish.
No, definitely. Michael, just to finish up on Ulster then, after seeing Donegal and Tyrone in action this weekend, or the weekend just gone, who do you fancy, for next weekend semi-final?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Donegal still have big question marks over their defence, and as we talked about earlier, were cut open at different stages, and had a ball gone the underside of the crossbar rather than hitting the crossbar full on, we'd probably be talking about Derry in an Ulster semi-final. But I'd probably be favouring Donegal just on, I think getting over the line in a game that they maybe shouldn't have won and that they haven't won in recent years might just be enough to spur them on. And as I said, Michael Murphy will do very little during the week, I'd imagine. Be interesting to see now whether it start at the weekend or whether they play a similar role with him. But I think the fact that other guys were able to step up, the likes of Niall O'Donnell, who stepped up massively in his absence, is big for them. I marginally give it to Donegal, but I don't know if it's a game that you could really confidently call, because you're not really 100% sure what you're going to get out of either. And I think the Ronan McNamee, it looks like they're going to appeal his red card. The Willie won't he, whether he plays as well, is going to have a massive bearing on the result. But I just give the minor nod to Donegal.
Yeah, it's set to be a great Ulster semi-final weekend with Monaghan and Armagh the other side of the draw, which should be a cracker as well. The other televised game yesterday, Donegal Mayo Leitrim, obviously was a non-event in terms of competitiveness. And, I know Eamon Sweeney was writing today's Irish Independent just kind of again about how the football champion this year, maybe Donegal and Derry, has been, fairly one-sided. But like Mayo's COVID situation, I suppose, is the big talking point around that game. And James Horan acknowledged afterwards that even for the Connacht final, they'll be up against it to get all those players back. We don't exactly know who has COVID and who may be a close contact or what have you, but looking through the team sheet, you can surmise that certain players are missing. It'll be an interesting couple of weeks for them to get ready for that goal again.
Yeah. Well, it's yesterday was just a bit of a waste of everyone's time, I think, to be honest. And this is the kind of thing we talk about around this time every year. And then, the All-Ireland, the provincial finals, the All-Ireland quarterfinals or whatever they are roll into view, and we kind of forget about it until the following summer. And then we're talking about, the minnows getting hammered again. But like half-time yesterday, I was at home here and I stepped out of the house. I went off, did something, came back for the last 15 minutes, 20 minutes of the game. And I don't think I missed anything. I don't think you're going to see anything there that was worth anyone's while to see. I think it's something, it's going to be addressed at Special Congress at the end of the year, but it is the kind of thing that we've been looking at for a long time, long since the start of the GAA nearly. For a long time it was the August Bank Holiday weekend, the All-Ireland quarterfinals that sort of saved the football championship, as it were, that there was 4 games on that weekend across the Saturday and the Sunday, and we all forgot about what happened beforehand. Then it was the Super 8s. And now, I think it's important that we remember these couple of weeks now going into the autumn. We remember that this is what happened in the first round of the league, and this is what we look at every year. So I think Terry Hyland was excellent on it afterwards. Excellent. The gap is only getting bigger. Money is more significant than ever in terms of preparing a team. And the fact that Mayo will go on and play on for another few weeks and Leitrim are gone until they're allowed to train next year or whenever that may be, or late this year, will only mean that by the time teams might roll into each other next 12 months' time, the gap will only be bigger. And that's just, there's no way around that. So I think it's important we remember that. As for Mayo, yeah, look, it was easy for them. They will need to be an awful. They'll need everyone they can get back. James Horan was very coy in it afterwards in terms of who was and who wasn't. I suppose managers are notoriously not forthcoming anyway. So who they can get back and when they can get back is vital. Like, you have to remember too, that was without Cillian O'Connor, who's arguably the most important player, and without Lee Keegan, who is one of the most important defenders, you could say. So. Yeah, Keegan, I believe, has a shoulder injury. Cillian O'Connor, we're not going to see him this year. So, look at Mayo. Mayo are in great shape in terms of that. They're probably the best of the rest after Kerry and Dublin in the All Ireland sense. But Galway will definitely cause them a problem or two, particularly if they're missing a few of those more experienced players.
Just Will, an interesting one. I think Andy Moore made a really good point yesterday. I was listening to him talking about resources, and he just said, resources is one thing, having facilities or whatever, but just the resources available to James Horn that he's able to carry, would say, more players than maybe smaller inter-county teams. So he's carrying 36 or 37. And so that means if they're hit by a COVID outbreak or a problem, which they have been, that he can still call on players that have had exposure to their squad and that have been training with their squad. Whereas, I know in a county like Offaly, like if we were hit with a COVID outbreak, I'm not sure if we'd be able to call on the same resources or have the same amount of guys up to speed as a really, really top tier county like that. So that's kind of a different argument to the resources where people talk about underage or whatever development. That's resources that you can actually see that's affecting your senior squad. So
they're running sub-panels as well, Mick.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're running, so if you're a good 20-year-old and you're not going to play for a Mayo or a Kerry straight away out of underage football, but what they will do is they effectively put you in the oven for a year or two. And Dublin did that with Brian Howard. Like, quietly, you heard all the talk, Brian Howard, this lad's ready, but they didn't need to play him, didn't need to bring him in. And then when they brought him, like, he was fully formed inter-county star, like, and to hold a panel of 40 or 45, just a huge draw on money. You have to feed them, you have to give them mileage, give them gear. For Leitrim, I did a piece with the Leitrim sponsor last for the weekend. He's a publican in Yonkers, very generous man, like, gets absolutely nothing out of it. Seamus Clark's his name, gets absolutely no return on investment, just gives over to try and help out his home county. But that's not what Mayo are dealing with. And that sometimes get lost in the argument. Like, the spend on preparation of teams is a huge factor. I remember Pat Flanagan saying it years ago when he was in charge of Offaly, and he was being asked how much difference would it make if I had a blank check to go and train your team, and he says, I don't know, but I'd love to find out. And I think that sums it up, that if you can give your players absolutely everything, you have a lot better chance of getting more out of them. So all the big counties have all the advantages over all the little counties. Like, it's asking for trouble, and it's asking for results, like we've seen over the last couple of weeks. It's
the options that are taken off the table. You can only work within these parameters, whereas inter-county managers with the bigger teams, the parameters are so wide with what they can do.
The other telling thing, just to go back, there was like 3,000 tickets, 3,500 tickets available for that Leitrim Mayo game. They only sold about 2,000 of them. Now, I know it was a bad day, but no one has got to football matches for the last 18 months, and we're they can't shift 3,000 tickets. I think people knew what was coming. It was 30 quid a head. If you're going from Leitrim, you had a fair idea what was going to happen to your team. You're going to lose the whole day. And you're probably going to lose, if you're bringing the family, you're going to lose more than €100 as well. Yeah. So I think that's one of the smaller headlines from the weekend, but I thought that was significant that you couldn't, who would have thought, going back in the depths of lockdown, that a championship game of any description with 3,000 tickets available wouldn't sell out, when we're all clawing at the door to get out. And, now, we can't sell 3,000 tickets for a Connacht championship match.
Yeah, it's mad when you think about it like that. Just to wrap up the football then, Michael, Munster final set, Kerry versus Cork. Kerry playing Tipperary on Saturday night, Cork in the afternoon against Limerick. Anything stand out to you across either of those games?
No, in fairness to Tipperary, I'd have to say on the flip side of Cavan, probably they've had a lot of problems coming into the championship, obviously, and were obviously relegated as well. But in fairness to them, when it looked like things could just go the wrong way completely, they stayed at it, and obviously losing Michael Quinlivan and there was so many things went wrong for them. But in fairness, they managed to keep the game probably maybe even more competitive than many would have expected. I know it was still the biggest defeat for a reigning provincial champion. I think it was Munster anyway. The biggest defeat for a long, long time. I saw it on Twitter there. But in fairness, they managed to keep it competitive enough. The only other thing is to just say that, like, watching David Clifford is just something else. It really is. It's rarely a week goes by when he's in action where you don't see something really, really special. And I think, I don't think there would have been any tickets going for Megan if the likes of David Clifford was playing in that game, because you just know you're going to get something. You're going to get something extraordinary nearly every day as he goes out. But I think everything basically much went to script in Munster at the weekend. In fairness.
Yeah, Donegal, obviously last year Cork produced a shock in the championship, beating Kerry. Like, from what you've seen, would you give them any hope of springing a similar surprise in the provincial decider, or if Kerry just kind of regrouped, moved on, and are too formidable for them?
A couple of things have changed. It's going to be played in summer football, which I think will be different. That was a horrible night. Cork deserved the win, no denying that, but that was a horrible night below. This should be played in far better conditions. And the other thing is, I think, markedly, just looking at some of the Kerry fellas close up, the body shapes have changed, I think. I think Gavin White in particular looks like he was always lightning with Crooks. Looks like he's put on some real power in there as well. You saw that in the goal. He was breaking tackles, possibly a questionable hand pass. Not that it would have made any difference, but a few of them, just like David Clifford seems to fill out, like that lockdown, whatever work they were doing in the gym or whatever. They do seem to be physically much more dominant. For Cork, look, they will know that Kerry are absolutely gunning for them. They feel like they owe them one. Kerry have played like a team who've been scalded by that thing all year. They've been dishing out 6 goals like against Tyrone. Like they've played like they owe everyone one, if you know what I mean. I think you're going to see more of that against Cork in the Munster final. I don't see Kerry getting caught again. Cork did enough the last day without being spectacular against Limerick. So look, if they manage to pull it off again, it'll be Kerry again that are the story for not getting the job done. But I'd be amazed now at this stage that if Kerry, with the warning from last year and with the bit between the teeth like they seem to have, if they don't take care of business in Munster reasonably easily there.
Great stuff, Donegal. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, Hurling took a bit of a break over the weekend, but we're delighted to have a very special guest on with us this week, and that is current Hurler of the Year, Limerick star and Board Gosh Energy Ambassador, Gearoid Hegarty. Gearoid, how are you?
How are you, lads? Thanks for having me on.
No, our pleasure. Great to have you on in the middle of the championship as well. I know you're preparing for a Munster final next weekend against Tipperary. What how are you feeling at the moment midway through a championship? Is it nice to kind of have a week off to take a bit of breath and kind of reflect? What are your kind of thoughts at the moment?
Yeah, it's great. The way the championship actually is at the moment is an ideal setup, really. You can have 2 weeks between every game. Gives you a few days after the game to recover, a couple of days off, and then you kind of get back training maybe the week and a half before the game. So and have 2 or 3 hard sessions in the lead up to the game. So I suppose it's great to be back playing hurling again in the summertime. It was obviously last year was a strange year. In many circumstances, but it was obviously great. Championship went ahead last year when there was so much uncertainty throughout the summer. But I suppose you grow up as a young fella going to games in the summertime in your jersey and shorts and enjoying the nice weather when you're getting to games. So it is great to be back hurling in the summertime. And I suppose it's the championship. It's just after starting, but there's only 5-6 weeks left in it, so it's going to be a short season this year. So as I said, it's a great setup. Short break between games, and that's what players want. It's games what you want. So, yeah.
Are you a full-time hurler for the summer now, Gearoid? You're off school now?
Yeah, pretty much. It's ideal, really. I can't say I have too much to be doing now throughout the day, to be honest, other than just relaxing, doing a bit of reading. To be honest, I love playing golf, but I haven't played much golf now this summer, just because there's so little time between games. To be honest, it's probably not ideal. So that's one thing that I haven't been doing this summer that I probably would have done before. But yeah, just relaxing, to be honest, and chilling out, doing a bit of reading, and just, as you said, kind of being almost professional athlete without the pay.
I was interested to read about your preparation. I thought there was almost a lack of preparation in the sense that you took a real break from hurling between the end of the All-Ireland final and coming back training with the Limerick team this year. I think some of your teammates did similar. I remember reading Sean Finn saying he took a similar kind of bit of a break. How important was that period for you? Because I suppose 2020 was so full on once it kind of came back. Was it important for you to kind of take a complete break from it for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, like I have to. Everybody is different. Some lads probably were training a week or two after the All-Ireland final. I can't. Like what works for me is just taking a complete break from it. I more so mentally rather than physically. Like I always feel like for example, we were training. We went back in November, December 2019. And obviously then the All-Ireland final was in December 2020, so that's a long period of training. Now we took a break, which has been well documented in the middle of 2020. But that's a long, we had about 12 or 13 months of training done before the All-Ireland final last year, so like that training doesn't just go away either, that training is stored. That training is stored away, and I took kind of January and February off. I was teaching, myself and my girlfriend, are both teachers. We went down to my father's as a house below in Ballybunion, and we were just working away from down there, teaching from home and going down to the beach in the evening with our two dogs. And it was brilliant. It was a complete reset. And then when we went back training, whenever it was, I was just really fresh, and I was mad for road, So I always feel, for myself personally, I like taking a complete break from it. Joe O'Connor, who was a strength and conditioning coach when a couple of years ago, Mikey Kiley, obviously now we're strength and conditioning coach, but he used to always say, if you don't fully switch off, you can't fully switch on. And that little quote always resonated with me, because I just felt like they told us, take January, take February off if you want. There's no structured training. If you want to do a bit of training for your own, just to feel good, you can, but they weren't giving us anything to do. Because then when we do go back in whenever it was, it will be full on. And as I said, it will be a short season. And we had so much work done anyway up to December 2020 that, you can tap back. You will tap back into all that work after a couple of weeks. So that was the thinking behind it. But as I said, everybody's different. That's what I did. Not necessarily would it work for everybody. Everyone is different. I'm sure other lads did differently, but that's what I wanted to do anyway. I didn't mind taking a break.
And do you think, I suppose, that kind of like taking a bit of time out of the game, was that maybe contributing to maybe Limerick league form? I suppose you lost maybe a couple more games than you ordinarily would have in a campaign. Were you guys satisfied that the break was more important than maybe coming back all guns blazing? Yeah,
potentially. I think the league this year was a bit different. It was obviously a very different other year. Sorry. We had only, did we have 2 weeks training before our first league? I think we played before Tipperary this year in the league. I think it was only 2 weeks. So we had literally nothing done before the league had started this year. So look, we weren't overly happy with our league performances, but we did know that we were obviously training. We were training hard to get ready for the championship. At the end of the day, the championship is the one that's important. So we had very little work done before the league had started, and we knew that. It takes time to get to the level that we need to get to, and we never panicked. But we weren't necessarily overly happy with some of our league performances. But we knew we'd be fine. I suppose it comes down to trust. It comes down to trust in that Mikey, our strength and conditioning coach, and Paul, our hurling coach, obviously would have us ready for championship. And we were fairly confident that they would. And time will tell.
Yeah, so your own journey has been an interesting one. Obviously, getting the Hurler of the Year honour, the ultimate honour for an individual in hurling. And I thought it was really interesting. I was reading a few of your quotes there from a week or two ago, and you were talking about after 2019, where you were taking off in a few games, and you were maybe doing a little bit of soul searching about your role, and you really took an analytical approach about how you could improve. How important was that, do you think, for the year that followed, to kind of really dig into your own performance and why you weren't maybe finishing out those games?
Yeah, like I'm a firm believer. No matter where you are in life, you can always improve. If you're like, look at the likes of, I always look at, I'm a huge fan of sports just in general. And you look at Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, and they're still improving even at their age. They're constantly getting better. So I'm a huge believer in that you can always get better no matter where you are. Like I believe if you're not getting better, you're actually getting worse. So that's something that I've always been doing, to be honest. But like, I suppose I'm lucky in the sense that I have such great people available to me to help me get better. But I think it's a thing that isn't really done, in my opinion. Like, I'm a school teacher. I always say to my kids inside in school, I can't read your mind. If you need help and you're sitting there and you're not telling me you need help, I can't read your mind. I'm a huge believer in that people don't ask for help as much as they should. And I suppose it takes a bit of courage as well to go out and actually look for help and admit that you need to get better at certain areas, or you're not good enough in one area, or so on or so forth. And like, I'm the same as a teacher. If a student ever come up to me looking for help, you're only delighted to help a student. It's the same with our stats team, or with our coaches, our strength and conditioning coach. They're only mad to give you help, but I suppose they can't read your mind if you don't go looking for the help at times, So as I said, it does take a bit of courage to go and look for that help, but I believe that the gains are humongous when you do actually step outside your comfort zone, admit that you're not good enough in certain areas, and try and improve. And as I said, you can always get better no matter where you're at.
While things looked perfect for you last year, Gearoid, are you still coming back to different guys and saying, and even Caroline Curd or whoever, saying, I need to work on this, this and this?
Oh yeah, I wouldn't say things were perfect at all last year. For me, I obviously had my best year so far, but when you do go back and I would reflect on every game, like when you do actually reflect on the games after every game, there's always loads of area for improvement. So as I said, it was my best year, 2020 by considered distance compared to other years, but there was plenty of areas that I needed to improve on, which hopefully I have done. And as I said, time will tell going into this year. And as I said, no matter how this year goes, when I go into next year, I look back on this year and there'll be plenty of things to work on as well. As I said, there's always areas that you can improve on no matter what. Nobody's ever the finished article, in my opinion.
Do you feel the pressure at all this year of the Hurler of the Year and being All-Ireland champions? Or do you feel much more pressure? Is your life, the way I put it, is your life much different as Hurler of the Year this year?
No, I don't, to be honest, because the Hurler of the Year was in 2020. It's a completely different year. 2021, what went on in 2020, what went on in 2019, so on and so forth, in my opinion, has absolutely no effect on what goes on in 2021. Everybody goes back to the drawing board when the All-Ireland final finishes any year. Everybody goes back to the drawing board. Everybody goes back training harder. Everybody wants to get better. It's the same for everybody. It's the same rules. Just because you're All-Star or Hurler of the Year, no matter what, All-Ireland champions, you don't get any special exemptions from referees or other teams. And no matter what it is, they actually want to beat you more. So no, I wouldn't think so.
The Limerick team has been on such an interesting journey. Like in 2018, when you won that All-Ireland, it was a real fairy tale story. It had been so long since Limerick had won it. Winning in 2020, you guys have probably been the top team for a couple of years. And I suppose maybe the attitude has maybe changed a bit. People are probably looking at you guys now as the favourites, and maybe some people may be hoping a neutral or an underdog could come along and challenge you. Like, has there been any mindset shift, or does that kind of resonate with the squad at all, that it is maybe different circumstances to when you were on the way up trying to win that first one?
Well, it is something that we would have talked about. We would never been favourites growing up. When we started off with Limerick, we would have been underdogs in every single game. And even in 2018, I think we were actually underdogs in literally every one of the games that we played. But look, it's something every successful team has to deal with. We take it as a huge compliment, being favourites for a match or being favourites for All-Ireland. It's not something we shy away from. We take that as a massive compliment, and we look at it as a challenge that you have to back up. Going into any game as favourites. It can be a positive or a negative. You can look at it in a negative sense, and I suppose you can look at this. You can say this for absolutely everything that goes on in life. You can look at it in either way. You can look at it as a negative in terms of that there's massive pressure going into a game being favourites or All-Ireland favourites or whatever it is, or you can look at it in a positive light and say what a massive compliment that is, that people think that we are whatever.
Yeah, it's an interesting switch, as you say, because Limerick, as you mentioned, would have been considered the underdogs. Did it take some time to adjust to that kind of mindset shift when you are the top dogs and people firing at you? Because from the outside looking in, Limerick, I sort of only really lost that one game against Kilkenny. You won the National League that year, you won the Munster titles back to back. There's been a lot of success, but how seamless a transition was it, or is it something that the coaching staff had to kind of work mentally with the players on?
Well, I suppose we're lucky that we have Caroline, who is our sports psychologist, who's absolutely brilliant at what she does. But it's actually something I was talking about recently. It's funny, like 2019, everybody looks at 2019 as a massive failure by Limerick in the All-Ireland semi-final. Like, we were beaten by a brilliant Kilkenny team, fairly and squarely. They were just better than us on the day. And as you said, we won every other game. We won the league that year. We won the Munster Championship. And then we went into an All-Ireland semi-final, beaten by Kilkenny by a point. So there's no embarrassment in losing to a brilliant Kilkenny team by a point in the All-Ireland semi-final. As you said, we won in 2018, we won in 2020. So you could look at it either way. You could look at it and say that we did struggle to deal with being favourites, maybe going into 2019 All-Ireland semi-final, and possibly we did. But as I said, if you can take it we take it as a massive compliment being favourites for any game. If people think we're favourites, that's a good thing in my opinion. And I suppose having the courage to go back it up then on game day is what's important.
You mentioned, Gearoid, about you're a massive fan of all sports. I presume you were watching the Euros last night. Are you glued to different things when you're not in training yourself?
Yeah. I love sport. I watch all sports. It's actually basketball as well. I'm after getting mad into in the last couple of months.
You have the height for it as well,
Well, actually, I probably wouldn't be if I was over there. I'd probably be on the smaller side of the averages. But yeah, watching the Euros last night was fascinating. I suppose one thing I took from the Euros is that there was 65,000 plus people inside the game last night, and where we currently are with fans getting back into games. And again, I do not want this to come across as negative. It's brilliant that fans are getting back into games, but I really do hope they ramp it up a small bit. Like, I was at the Limerick Cork football game there on Saturday night, and it was actually an uncomfortable experience to be in the stadium. I don't know, did you see any of the reaction from it? But it was madness. Like, there was stewards. We walked into the ground. There was a fella on a big microphone roaring at people. Everybody have to have your masks on at all times. You go into the turnstile, give your ticket. The person behind the turnstile says, make sure you have to have your mask on at all times. There's stewards walking around constantly, giving out to people that they don't have their masks on. There was Munster Council officials walking around the stadium, roaring at people to make sure everybody. Like, it's just madness. Like, and again, I don't like being negative, and it's brilliant that fans are back in games, but you're literally buying tickets can only be bought in pods of 4 or pods of 2. So you're going into the game with people that you're probably living with anyway. Like, I was inside with 3 of my housemates sitting in the 4 of us having to wear masks, and we're living together. I know, not everybody is in the same situation. Not everybody will be living together that are sitting beside each other. But if you're buying it pot of 4 or pot of 2, you're realistically going to be in their bubble anyway. You're going to be hanging around with them inside, and you're at a game inside in a 45,000 seater stadium, sitting beside people you live with, and you're forced to wear a mask. Like, it was honestly, it was an uncomfortable experience actually being in the Gaelic grounds on Saturday night with how it was dealt with. And that's the first game I've been to in a long, long time. Obviously, I'm not sitting in the stands for our own games, but it was a strange one. And then you go watch the game last night, and the 65,000 people plus in Wembley last night without any masks. I just think the masks inside in the stadium is a bit ridiculous in my opinion.
And how have you found the inter-county experience generally, playing in these empty stadiums, albeit, a couple of fans now, like, say, contrast like winning an All-Ireland in 2020 versus like getting to do it in front of the fans? Like, was it a kind of obviously unbelievable to win an All-Ireland, but was it slightly joyless in a sense because it was so devoid of atmosphere?
I was asked this question quite a lot. It wasn't at all joyless because in 2018 it was absolutely incredible, and like, if I was to pick one, I would pick 2018 without a doubt, because the fan, like, games are 100 times better without fans, and that's obvious. But in 2020 we were prepared that we knew there was going to be no fans for any games, and we were just delighted the championship had gone ahead in any sense, because there was so much uncertainty throughout the summer whether it was going to go ahead or whether it wasn't. And you're thinking, like, I'm 27 next month, and it could have been a full year gone, and you don't have too long playing intercounty hurling. So 1 year being wasted is is quite a significant chunk of your playing career. But 2020 was amazing because of the circumstances. It nearly made it even better, to be honest, because of all the uncertainty whether it was going to go ahead or not. And being able to go, like the best part of 2020 was actually being able to go training on those November nights, and at the end of October, maybe when we went back, and throughout November, when we were in the middle of a lockdown, the 5K rule was in existence. You weren't allowed to leave your house. And we were obviously, intercounty players were given exemption to go to training, and the crack we had on those nights, it was special. And then obviously to go all the way and actually win the All-Ireland, I suppose, as well, after the disappointment in 2019, to win the All-Ireland in 2020 after that disappointment. There was loads of factors that made it really, really special. So I wouldn't say it was any bit disappointing. Believe me, we internally as a team, we enjoyed it just as much as we did in 2018, but obviously the atmosphere and the raw emotion from the stands wasn't existing. But we knew that wasn't going to be there anyway, so we were prepared for that. But all in all, 2018 would be the one that I would pick for obvious reasons.
And, we saw over the weekend with Mayo in their preparation for Leitrim, COVID cases causing some disruption and players being available. Like, how big has that loomed, in the squad? Like, the sense that, like, one case could potentially rule out a load of lads if they're close contacts or what have you. Like, is it something that you have to put to the back of your mind? Or is it something that's kind of causing a little bit of nervousness at times? Because, people can pick it up, very randomly for almost no reason. So I know everyone's testing each other and so they're trying to make sure it doesn't get in. But is there any nervousness or worry that something like that could happen?
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Sure, like realistically, once 2 or 3 weeks out from the Cork game, you pretty much have to go into your own bubble, like, and not really, like, you can't really go and meet people that you wouldn't normally meet. Like, I'm only meeting the lads that I'm living with every day. And maybe calling home every so often. I wouldn't really be going into anyone else's houses. Like, nothing has changed in terms of last year compared to this year. When we go training, we're still talking out in the stand. We're not in the dressing rooms. You're getting your temperature taken before training. You still have to wear masks. So, like, it's not as if we're back to normal either. You know what I mean? Like, we're still doing everything that we were doing in 2020 because it hasn't gone away. Now, obviously, a lot more people are vaccinated, and that reduces the risk quite a lot. But even if you're vaccinated, I suppose you can still be a close contact. So you have to be very careful, because a two week quarantine for being a close contact to someone that tested positive, and you're going to miss a game, and somebody could get in your place and do really well, and you might struggle to get back in. So nothing has really changed, to be honest, from last year's championship to this year's championship in terms of how we have to prepare. You have to be super careful, like.
Gearoid, it's something that keeps kind of coming up. I was chatting to Kieran Carey a couple of weeks ago, and even former Limerick players, and even guys in amongst your squad. How conscious are you of, like, making hay while the sun is shining and while you're kind of on top at the moment? How conscious are you of basically winning everything you can while you can?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think ask any intercounty player from any team that question. Every single player wants to win everything that's available to them. That's just the way it is. But yeah, you have to. Like, if you don't, what are you putting in all the hours for? Like, it's playing intercounty is a full-time job. I consider myself having 2 full-time jobs. I'm a teacher, but I'm also an intercounty player. Like, it's a full-time job. As I said, look at us now. We're in the middle of the summer. You can't. A good few of my best friends that I went to school with, that I'm still really, really close to, went out last night, and they went to one of the pubs to watch the game, and, like, I wouldn't even go down and have a pint of my body and watch it with them, just in case, because it's just too much of a risk. So, like, you just have to look after yourself so much, and if you look at all the sacrifices you have to make, you have to be. You're pretty much living in your own bubble, as I said. You can't really meet up with your own friends, and if you don't actually make all those sacrifices, then you're wasting your time, and you're making all those. My point is, you're making all those sacrifices to give yourself the best chance of winning everything. You have to be ruthless in this game. I always believe it's somebody has to. When I was growing up, I always used, when Limerick hadn't won All Ireland in so long, I always thought, like, somebody has to win the All Ireland every year. No matter what. Like, in January of every year, that August or that September, somebody will be lifting Liam McCarthy. So why can't it be us? Why can't it be me walking up the Hogan steps? So you have to be ruthless. If you don't want to win everything, then you probably won't, put it that way, because you're probably not in the right mindset.
How big a driver is going back to back? Limerick have never done that before. even just generally a team goes back to back, they're marked out as one of the all-time great teams. It would be 3 and 4 years if you did it this year. Is making that bit of history as a county something that's been discussed, or something that even you personally would like to kind of tick off the list?
It's not something that we've ever talked about as a team. Look, people know that Limerick haven't gone back to back in a long time. But as I said, it's a funny one, because I don't like thinking about it too much, because if you start thinking about, God, we won it last year, can we win it again this year? Limerick haven't won it in so long. As I said, what happened in 2020 has absolutely no impact on what happens in 2021. And I think that's when you can kind of, and it is the boring answer, and I always caveat this by saying it is the boring answer, but when you start to think forward, if you start to look ahead, start to think of All-Ireland semi-finals when you don't have the Munster final played, or All-Ireland finals when you're not, like, that's when you can get caught. That's when you get caught. You have to be really, really tuned in and focused on whatever game is coming next. Because if you don't, and you're off by that couple of percent, that's when you're not fully on your game. And at this level, as we've seen before, when you're not 100%, even if you're at 95, 96%, that's when you can be beaten. And it's a long few months for the next championship to come back around, and a lot of hard training in winter time, and it's awful. So I suppose you have to learn from mistakes that you've made before, maybe in years gone by. And as I said, it is the boring answer, but you just have to be so tuned into whatever's coming next and not look too far down the line.
Just on what you said there, Gearoid, and even I remember you saying after the All-Ireland final last year that you'd no idea that you're after scoring 7 points. You practicing, and like even with some of your reading, being in the moment, I'd imagine, is something that's a massive thing for you.
Well, it is, but I'm sure if you've ever done any reading around it, it's a very, very, very tough place to get into. They call it flow, and there's thousands of research going into how to best get into flow. And it's, as I said, it's a very, very hard thing to do, but I was fortunate enough to get into them that day. And as I said, I was just, again, comes back to things I've learned in the past. And Paul Kinnerk, who's our coach, who I've the utmost time and respect for, who's an absolutely brilliant coach, had always challenged me on my consistency. It's something that I've talked about before. And he just had little triggers for me throughout the game to I suppose not relax maybe after a point or two and think, you're grand now for a few minutes, I get my breath now for 5-10 minutes. But I suppose at this level you can't really, and that's the next step. That was the next step up, for me to get to, and the next challenge that he put in front of me at that time. And I was just so in the zone in that game to keep hunting for the ball and keep trying to get on more ball, keep trying to get on more possessions, keep trying to impact the game, that I kind of just completely forgot. It's happened to me before. It's not the only game it's ever happened to me, but it's just, obviously I was talking about it after the game and it was picked up on. But it's a tough one to get into, but it's a great place to get to when you can get there.
Yeah, you mentioned Paul Kinnerk there, and I suppose he gets a lot of praise and attention for the tactical work he's done with the team. But one thing that really does stand out is, I suppose, the physical size of the Limerick team as well. And I know strength and conditioning can be a kind of a years-long process. Could you give us a bit of an insight into what that's been like? Because that does seem to be one of the team's strengths, is just the size of you. It must have been a couple of years away at that.
I reckon your jerseys are altered as well, Gearoid, to enhance the physical features.
Possibly. But as you said, it takes so long. It takes so long to get to, in my opinion, strength and conditioning level for intercounty hurling. The amount of bad days I put down in the gym where I thought I was going nowhere, hitting a plateau in the gym and you can't get past a certain weight on a certain exercise. And it is tough. It's really, really tough. And we have young lads on the panel now that are kind of going through the same thing. They're maybe not making 26s, and they're going to the gym every week with us, and they're comparing themselves to lads that are well down the road that have 7 or 8 years of gymming done, and they're maybe 2 or 3 years in. And believe me, I was there once upon a time, and it's not a great place, but you just have to stick with it. I actually read a great quote there the other day about in the book that I just finished there the other day about bamboo, the tree bamboo, and it says that what is it? It takes bamboo. Nothing happens with the tree bamboo. It doesn't grow at all for 5 years, but it's putting together extensive root systems under the ground, and then within a couple of weeks it can shoot 90 feet into the air. So people talk about overnight sensations. I completely disagree with the overnight sensation. The overnight sensation idea that someone can just out of nowhere come from the blue and just be absolutely brilliant all of a sudden. It just takes years of hard work to get to wherever you want to be, no matter what you're doing. It's the same with the gym. I call it the culture of the quick fix. Everybody wants everything now. Nobody, but are you really willing to put into work? I've friends that have come to me before looking for fitness plans or looking for meal plans, and they give up after 2 or 3 weeks because they don't see any improvement. It's funny. Everybody wants everything now. I call it the culture of the quick fix, but the majority of people aren't willing to put into work over a long period of time to get to where they want to. And I suppose they're the people that will see success, but it takes years. I don't think anything worth doing, it takes a long time. But yeah. But that's just the result of a lot of good work in the Limerick academies, because we would have done a bit of gym work growing up from under 14s up. But it takes a lot of discipline, a lot of hard days as well as good days. People see the good days, they don't see the bad days. And there's just as many of them as well, believe me.
Well, Gearoid, thanks so much for giving us that insight into your career, the Limerick setup, and best of luck in the Munster final and the rest of the championship.
Cheers, lads.
That's all we have time for this week on the Throw On podcast in association with Bord Gáis Energy. We will be back next week with another podcast. In the meantime, you can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, or listen on independent.ie. So until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.
Bord Gáis Energy, proud sponsors of the GAA All-Ireland Senior Hurling Championship and GAA Legends Tour Series of Croke Park. #Hurling to the core.